Hello everyone, this lecture series is brought to you by Raj Malhotra IAS Institute, Chandigarh. By means of this lecture series, I, Ayush Gupta, cover for you Indian Express's Explained section, the big picture debates of the Rajya Sabha TV and the Science Monitor by Rajya Sabha TV. In our today's lecture, the context is provided to us by a news in the Indian Express's Explained section, that is today's Explained section, in which it talks about that now Apple has entered into an agreement with Japan's Fair Trade Commission to allow apps to have use their own payment networks and bypass the payment network by App Store. So why was this done? Basically, there were challenges to Apple's policy of only allowing companies to use its own payment network. This was placing many apps on a disadvantage vis-a-vis other apps, because Apple used to take a cut of about 15 to 30% by these companies. So on what grounds did Apple take these cuts? Apple said that it is providing a secure network. So the companies argued that otherwise also the other networks, various networks are being used in the world in order for payment transactions, and those networks are secure as much as Apple's own network. Besides this thing, the apps which are run by Apple themselves, such as the Apple Music app, does not have to pay these things. So they run at a disadvantage vis-a-vis Apple's own apps. So that Japan's Fair Trade Commission did not take any action against them, Apple has entered into an agreement with these apps so as to allow them to have their own payments network. However, today Apple has actually opened up this service for the entire world, for all the companies in the entire world. Why does Apple do this thing? We'll also get to know that by the end of this lecture. However, this is not just one news. This is a news in a series. This is one thing in a series of news. Which are these series of news? And all of these things will come down to only one thing, that is with respect to regulation of platform companies. That is the main topic of our today's discussion. Because certain times the news is just the basically the cover of the book. What we need to know is as to what is inside the book. That is the main thing that we need to look. So the second thing is, recently in Australia also, news publishers got together against Google, demanding that Google should pay them for their content that Google shows in its news feeds, and rather saying that Google was actually earning through their news material, their content, and they were languishing in lurch of revenues. So that Australian government does not bring a legislation with this respect so as to make Google pay them, Google has introduced News Showcase. That is a new venture, and through this new venture, Google has today entered into agreement with various news publishers across the world, trying to give them and ensuring that they get value for their content. This is again done in a manner so that no particular regulation should be brought on them. So self-regulation is always sought by everyone rather than a regulation by the government. The third in order is that today Uber treats all its drivers as employees in UK. This is a very big thing, and this is a departure from the contractor approach that Uber has towards its drivers. Why was this done? Because the various unions in UK demanded various rights with respect to being employees of Uber. They said that they were employees of Uber and they were not basically their contractors, because they did not had any choice whatsoever and they were full-time working on Uber apps. So in this very manner, today in UK, all the employees, all the Uber cab drivers are considered as employees. एम्प्लॉय होने से फ़र्क क्या हो जाता है? एम्प्लॉय होने से आपको कंपनी को सोशल सिक्योरिटी मेजर्स देने होते हैं, पेड लीव्स देनी होती हैं, ये सारी कॉस्ट्स अदरवाइज ऊबर की बच जाती थी व्हेन ऑल द वर्कर्स वर्कड एज गिग वर्कर्स और एज कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स विद देम. In this very line, let us also know about the concept of net neutrality. Although it does not deal with platform companies that we are talking about today, these platform companies which we will be talking about today are with respect to those companies which have created huge networks by means of internet. However, नेट न्यूट्रलिटी होती क्या है? नेट न्यूट्रलिटी इंडिया में कॉन्सेप्ट आया जिसके अंदर हमारे सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने हैज इंश्योर्ड दैट इंडिया शुड हैव नेट न्यूट्रलिटी. बेसिकली व्हाट यूज्ड टू हैपन वाज, इंटरनेट सर्विस प्रोवाइडर्स जब आप कोई किसी भी साइट के लिए उसके ऊपर डालते हैं तो यू विल सी दैट सर्टेन साइट्स open up very quickly, whereas other sites take a long time to open up. What was happening is basically the internet service providers ensured that certain sites got the preference and got opened up quickly. And when a site that you are trying to log into is not opening up quickly, then what will the consumer do? Ultimately, the consumer will drift to its alternative. So, the Supreme Court said that you cannot, by this very manner, create an unfair market and you cannot give advantages to other players. Basically, as internet service provider, your job is only to provide internet connection and you cannot mingle in this business in this very manner. Then, fifthly, ई-कॉमर्स के रिगार्डिंग हमारी कंट्री के अंदर पास्ट में काफ़ी सारी रेगुलेशंस आई, जिसके अंदर मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ कॉमर्स ने एक और रेगुलेशन डाली थी विद रिस्पेक्ट टू रेगुलेशन ऑफ ई-कॉमर्स एंटिटीज, दैट द फ्लिपकार्ट, Amazon, these companies should not be selling their own products on their platforms. Secondly, they should also not, all the companies जिनकी इन्वेंट्री, जिनके सारे स्टॉक को फ्लिपकार्ट या Amazon ही मैनेज करता है, वह कंपनीज भी अलाउड नहीं होनी चाहिए इनके प्लेटफॉर्म पे काम करने के लिए. एंड व्हाई इज दैट थिंग? बिकॉज इट वाज सीन दैट दीज प्लेटफॉर्म्स सच एज Flipkart and Amazon, e-commerce companies, were actually promoting their own very products only, or the products of those people with whom they had contracts, whereas they presented themselves as a market space only and a place which had nothing to do with respect to selling of the products. So this was a limitation which was put on them. Now, the question arises as to what are platform companies and why we are asking this thing. Because you can see there are various regulations. Government has been trying to regulate these companies one or the other day. So there's got to be a problem with the entire concept, or there's something fishy about the concept. For that we need to understand what are platform companies and why is there a need to regulate them, and what are the available laws and steps which can be taken so as to regulate them. So platform economies, platform companies होती क्या है? So platform companies basically provide you with a marketplace, and in this marketplace it tries to create a network of producers and consumers. There are certain producers which are on this network and there are consumers also in this network. So producers will come and sell their products online and consumers will purchase those products. So let us also go through the definition as such. So a platform is a business model that creates value by facilitating exchanges between two or more interdependent groups. For example, Uber को ले लीजिए. Uber में क्या होता है? Basically all the cab drivers are dependent upon the riders. And Uber क्या करता है? Uber उनको एक मीडियम देता है कनेक्ट करने का. Through that very medium, get to know कि कौन सा ड्राइवर कहाँ पे है, ड्राइवर को वो राइडर तक पहुंचा देता है, and it also facilitates the payment mechanism. So, in order to make these exchanges happen, platforms harness and create large scalable networks of users and resources that can be assessed on demand. So, बिना अगर एक प्लेटफॉर्म पे सफिशिएंट नंबर ऑफ प्रोड्यूसर्स नहीं है एंड सफिशिएंट नंबर ऑफ कंज्यूमर्स नहीं है, तो दोनों प्लेटफॉर्म्स, दोनों एंटिटीज़ के लिए उस प्लेटफॉर्म की यूटिलिटी खत्म हो जाएगी. सो प्लेटफॉर्म को इंश्योर करना पड़ता है कि उसके प्लेटफॉर्म पे यूजर्स भी आए एंड प्रोड्यूसर्स भी आए. वो कैसे इंश्योर करता है, ये उनके बिजनेस मॉडल पे डिपेंड करता है. एंड इस प्रोसेस के अंदर भी कई बारी ऐसी प्रॉब्लम्स होती हैं विच आर डिस्टॉर्शंस टू द मार्केट. हाउएवर, इन जनरल अगर हम लार्ज एस्पेक्ट में देखें तो प्लेटफॉर्म कंपनीज ने लार्ज स्केल वैल्यू क्रिएट करी है. उन्होंने काफ़ी सारी ऐसी कॉस्ट्स को रिड्यूस कर दिया है विच वर अनटुवर्ड कॉस्ट, जो कि कंज्यूमर या प्रोड्यूसर को पे करनी पड़ती थी. So in this very manner, they have also given a boost to the economy, and these things have specifically been noted down by the finance minister himself or herself generally, Nirmala Sitharaman herself said that Uber and Swiggy and Zomato has provided more employment than any other companies. So moving forward, now प्लेटफॉर्म हम देखते हैं 3 पिलर्स जिन पे प्लेटफॉर्म कंपनीज वर्क करती हैं सो एज टू स्ट्रीमलाइन आवर आंसर. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, ऑर्केस्ट्रेटिंग रिसोर्सेस. बेसिकली प्लेटफॉर्म कंपनीज रिसोर्सेस का एक वेब बना लेती हैं. एंड व्हाई आर दीज प्लेटफॉर्म कंपनीज वायबल? बिकॉज प्लेटफॉर्म कंपनीज को खुद इन रिसोर्सेज को परचेज करने की या इन्वेस्ट करने की जरूरत नहीं होती. फॉर एग्जाम्पल ऊबर को लीजिए. ऊबर खुद कोई भी कैब ओन नहीं करती है. Basically, it is the drivers who are making the investment in the cab, and Uber is just basically making them run around and connecting them with the users. So, जो main किसी टैक्सी कंपनी को इन्वेस्टमेंट करनी पड़ती, जो कि किस में थी, जो कि कार्स में होती है, वो उबर को नहीं करनी पड़ी. Whereas उबर को सिर्फ Uber just has certain, what do you say, MBA graduates and technology experts who are making this entire thing happen. Then इस चीज से हम ये भी समझ सकते हैं that today these platform companies, for example Google, Facebook, Uber, basically they earn the maximum amount of revenue per employee, per individual who's working. Because why? Because the investment cost is very low. Now create a governance for the ecosystem. Now after orchestrating all these resources, then they have to create a governance model. Basically, they have to keep in mind the thing that all the people who come on their platform have a fine interaction, and they need to see that all their needs are met, and in what manner are they going to interact with one another. अगर ये governance mechanism एक end के users के लिए ठीक नहीं है, तो this is going to impact the entire ecosystem. इसका मैं आपको एक और एग्जाम्पल देता हूं. उबर की पहले उबर में क्या होता था, जो ड्राइवर होता था उसके पास आपका नंबर जाता था, एंड दोज ड्राइवर्स कैन कनेक्ट यू डायरेक्टली ऑन योर फोन नंबर. उसके बाद कुछ एक ऐसी न्यूज आने लगी एंड ऐसे इंसिडेंट्स होने लगे जहां पर ड्राइवर्स हैड स्टार्टेड कॉन्टैक्टिंग देयर राइडर्स ऑन फेसबुक. एंड हाउ डिड दैट हैपन? बिकॉज फेसबुक के अंदर लॉग इन करने के लिए आपका नंबर यूज किया जा सकता है, एंड वही नंबर डाल के आई कैन ऑल्सो सर्च एनी प्रोफाइल. सो ड्राइवर्स स्टार्टेड, मेनी miscreants started using those numbers and sending friend requests to the riders. This created an environment of, you can say, distrust among certain riders like women, and this was going to impact their market. So what did Uber do? Uber has framed a system in which today the driver does not get your number, however he is still able to call you. In this very manner, they reframed this entire governance structure, this interaction between the producer and the rider, so as to streamline and keeping in mind the rights and the safeguards that both need vis-a-vis one another. Then focus on the ecosystem value. So these platforms have to ensure that whatever interactions they create, those interactions should result into transactions. Basically राइडर और ड्राइवर एक साथ तो आ गए, लेकिन उनको कनेक्ट करने के बाद वो ट्रांजैक्शन में भी बदलना चाहिए. इट इज इन दिस वेरी मैनर दे सेट डाउन सर्टन रेट्स कि किस रेट पे कितने किलोमीटर आप जा सकते हैं. सो दिस इज ऑल्सो वेरी नेसेसरी. एंड अगर वो ये नहीं कर पाते हैं, if they're not able to convert interactions into transactions, then the entire system could crumble at any point in time. Now, why is there need to regulate platform companies? Now, the need to regulate platform companies stem from the very fact and the nature that every platform needs to acquire. Basically, the aim of any good platform today is to become a monopoly in its own very area. So monopoly का मतलब ये है कि अगर टैक्सी सर्विस कोई ऑपरेट कर रहा है तो वह सिर्फ उबर ही करे, अगर सर्च इंजन कोई चल रहा है तो वह सिर्फ गूगल ही हो. सो आज की डेट में अगर हम मोनोपोली की बात करें, सो गूगल इज वन सच मोनोपोली इन सर्च इंजन थिंग्स. सो व्हाट इज द बेनिफिट ऑफ बिकमिंग अ मोनोपोली? मोनोपोली का बेनिफिट ये है कि इवन इफ यू आर नॉट चार्जिंग योर कस्टमर्स any a single penny, still you will be in profit forever. ऐसा होता कैसे? For example, Google does not charge all the websites for whom it makes it easier to connect to the users who want to come to them, and it does not charge us, the users, for the search facility that it is providing us with. Then where does Google earn its revenue from? Google earns its revenue from advertisements. And in this very manner, Google has attained such a stature that it is impossible for Google to report loss in any quarter. Which is why every company wants to become a platform. And that is also the case with Uber. Uber ने अपना एम सबका यही है, एंड इस एम को अचीव करने के लिए they might do certain practices which are harmful for the competition in the market, and we'll see in our future slides as to how and what sort of practices do they do. So besides this, अगर एक virtual monopoly आपके ऊपर आ जाती है, आपके पास आ जाती है, then you are also in a position to impact the interactions between the users. What happens is, if today one company becomes so big that in order to dislodge that company from its very place, it becomes very difficult for any new company to come up, because that very company has to then take away all the customer, all the producers and the consumers from that site to its own site, which becomes extremely difficult once there is a monopoly. In this very manner, you can see with respect to Google also, even after the laptops of different companies, when we purchase them, when they come up with their own search engines, still we go to Google and still we make Google as a default search. So issues have been raised in various jurisdictions where certain companies have become, certain platform companies have become monopolies. Now, how do they become monopoly? ये देखते हैं कि monopoly बना कैसे जाए. So what happens is, platform companies are basically supplied with resources, with money from major investors, and this money is supplied to them so as to burn in the market, so that they can provide certain subsidies and certain services at such a low cost to their consumers that the consumers that no other basically entity could provide them with those costs, an entity that does not have that sort of an investment, that sort of a money to burn. For example, Uber को ले लीजिए. Uber ने जब अपना IPO निकाला, initial public offering निकाली, then in that very IPO's document, Uber says that we might not profit any time. And how is that? Then if they do not profit, Uber is actually reporting losses in tunes of thousands of crores every year. Then where is this money coming from? This money is basically coming from certain banks and certain investors. And why are these investors filling in the coffers of Uber for such a long period of time? Because they know that once Uber becomes the sole cab aggregator in one country, at that very point in time, they can charge, they can fix rates whatsoever, in whatsoever manner they want to, and there will be no competitor left with them. So in this very manner, this is also known as predatory pricing. Predatory pricing क्या होती है? जब आप एक प्रोडक्ट को उसकी कॉस्ट वैल्यू के बिलो में बेच रहे हैं, then naturally it is impossible for any other individual to sell that very product, because how can that individual, every individual has a limit so as to sustain losses, and therefore we have to see this thing. Then, however, if a platform is creating value just by the virtue of its scaling networks, just by the virtue of its reach to the people and appeal to the people, then it's fine. However, if it is doing certain practices so as to undermine the basic cost of the product in the market and to weed out its competitors in that very manner, then it is there where the problem starts. Now, इस चीज से impacted सबसे ज्यादा कौन होंगे? For example, gig workers को ले लीजिए. All the workers who are working in these companies, their basically income has become dependent on the platforms. So in future, when the platform becomes a monopoly, it is up to that very platform as to what sort of termination policies or what sort of empanelment policies they are going to have. and those workers will have to fulfill those things. Second thing, जब आप monopoly बन जाएंगे तो कौन impact होगा? The consumers, because then the consumers will not have an effective choice. Consumer की choice उनसे ले ली जाएगी. So both the consumers and both the gig workers, the producers, are going to be impacted in this very manner. So if you try and analyze this thing, platform companies which start as basically providing the best resources and quality to producers and consumers, in their ultimate aim, if they become a monopoly, they might come in a position in which it impacts both the producer's rights and the consumer's right. Then the question now is, how do we regulate these platforms? Now, the most important thing while we discuss this thing is that now platforms are not really, we are not to consider them as certain bad companies or something, because we have to remember them that because they were not regulated by the government, they were able to grow at this very scale. They have added economy, they have added value to the economy. So now we have to see that while regulating them, to ensure that they do not hamper competition in the market and also do not hamper the rights of the producers who are on their platform as well as the consumers who come on their platform, we have to do this in a very calibrated manner so that these regulations do not impinge on their growth and do not impinge the entire value ecosystem that they have created. So the first thing that we have towards this, and the first and the most important weapon that we have in our hand, or the tool that we have in our hand, are the antitrust laws. So what are antitrust laws? Antitrust laws are statutes developed by governments to protect consumers from predatory business practices and ensure fair competition. Antitrust laws are applied to a wide range of questionable business activities such as market allocation, bid rigging, price fixing and monopolies. So antitrust laws क्या करते हैं? Antitrust laws sees this thing that these companies, any platform company or for that matter any company, does not work in such a manner so that they are creating monopolies in the market, or they start fixing price of a product and consumers have to purchase the product on that very price only. And how does they do this thing? With respect to India, when we are talking about, then we have the Competition Act of 2002 that deals with this thing. So Competition Act of 2002 provides the government with a number of tools so as to stop platform companies doing this. The government can, under Competition Commission, if the Competition Commission finds that yes, certain platform companies or certain companies for that very matter are working in such a manner that they're distorting the market and unfair trading system has been worked out in the market so as to create monopolies, then they can even ask the companies to split themselves. US के अंदर ये बहुत ज़्यादा चल रहा है. US के अंदर every state is bringing an antitrust law against antitrust suit against Facebook, asking that Facebook should actually be broken down into other companies, such as Facebook should be separated from WhatsApp, it should be separated from Instagram, because what is Facebook doing? They are arguing that Facebook is actually purchasing any competitor that comes into the market, and it creates unfair space in the market for those very competitors, and thereby it is becoming and gaining a monopoly stature over all the information tools that there are, be it the messaging system, be it the online social networking system. At every point in wherever you see, Facebook is trying to become the sole a monopoly when it comes to communication. Then there is also a need to enhance the capacity and scope of the commission. Basically, a lot of research work goes into seeing and analyzing as to where the company is actually doing these practices, and for that very thing, the resources and the scope of the workings of the commission in India needs to be enhanced so that it can have an effective oversight over any company that is trying to distort competition in the market. Then, besides this, government intervention can also be useful in certain scenarios. Government intervention did took place in Australia, and which is why the newspaper publishers got their fair share of revenue from Google. When we speak about YouTube, now just let's understand about YouTube. YouTube pays the content creators as per themselves. The content creators have very little say, or I'd say no say, in asking YouTube as to what it is going to pay him or pay her. So in this very manner, they do not have any authority as to how much money that they can be paid. For example, and this is the same thing that happens in other companies also, such as Uber and Ola. In their scenario also, it is the companies that they're deciding what they're going to pay the drivers. And the drivers are effectively not having any, you can say, muscle so as to manipulate that very thing or have a say in those compensation things. So, it is here where government can intervene and ensure that the producers and the consumers get a say and their rights are not violated. Lastly, there is a need for the platform users to organize themselves. Now, not everything can be brought down from up. Certain efforts need to come from the downside also. In this very case, there should be consciousness created on the part of the users of the platform so that their rights are not hampered. In recent times, we have seen examples that Uber riders, basically drivers, have unionized, and at times they've also conducted strikes, and which is also the reason why sometimes in the past we were not able to access certain rides at certain point in time, so that they are able to exert pressure on Uber to hike the rates of the rides. So in this very manner, these three steps can be taken with respect to regulation of platforms. And this is all with respect to today's lecture. Should you have any doubt, feel free to comment in the comment boxes, and I'm also attaching the PDF version of this PPT along with this file, along with this video. Thank you and have a nice day.